Hi guys, I'm Dan at vintagevelo.org and today we are going to be building up this very sexy looking Benotto 3000, and while we're at it we are going to look at and debunk some of the myths and mistruths about Benotto bikes themselves. What we have here is a really nice looking Benotto 3000, Italian made, Columbus SL throughout, and of course Campagnolo forged steel dropouts front and back with chrome forks to boot. Now, reason why there's a lot of myths about Benotto is because back in the day it was very prolific builders, the Benotto brothers. And especially in America, they were very popular. So popular that from the early 70s, they started to shift production to Mexico. And then as it went on, they shifted more and more production to Mexico because it was much easier to make and ship into, and cheaper to ship into the States. This was not without problems. The Mexican Benottos had a tendency, their quality control, especially in the brazing department, was not really up to much. And there are a lot of problems with overheating of the brazed areas and during the brazing process on Mexican-made Benottos. This can lead to cracking, and of course these are heat treated, so you've got heat treatment issues as well when you're overheating heat treated steel. Now, that goes for most of the Benotto models, from 850s, the lower end 850s, 2000s, 2.5. It's mainly the 3000s that remained made in Italy. Even the 5000s, a lot of those were made in Mexico as well, and some 3000s. So just to confuse things. Now, obviously, if you're a bona fide collector, there are, thousands and thousands of vintage bikes out there. Would I take a risk on a Mexican-made Benotto, knowing that it could well crack and I'm not going to get top performance out of it? Probably not. There were loads of bikes, get something else, I would, or hang out and get an Italian-made Benotto 3000 because they don't have those issues. How do you know you've got an Italian-made? Well, it'll be a 3000, so we'll have the diamond chainstays. Let me get you in there and show you about those. Now let me get you in close here on the diamond chainstays. Now I'll get you in real close and you can really see here that these are quite a distinctive diamond chainstay. You'll always know you're looking at a Benotto 3000 when you see this diamond work. It's you can't mistake it for anything else. They've been fully formed. They're a really key feature. Now, as well as being a 3000, it'll also have a made in Italy sticker on there, and on the underside of the bottom bracket, a big I stamped in for Italy. That's how you tell you've got a genuine Italian made one. Now, this one here, I bought direct from Italy. It's an X-Team bike, and it is definitely Italian made, so there's no controversy there. But the mistruths and the controversy doesn't stop there. Now, this comes down to then, they were made in Italy. But where were they made? Their main factories in Mexico. Well, it was dead simple. They were made at the Rosa factory in Italy. So these are made by Rosa. No, they're not. And this is something that kind of grinds my gears a bit. You see this a lot in eBay ads and things like that, that are Benotto 3000, made by the fair hands of the master Ugo de Rosa. No, it's just not true. These were made at the Derailleurs factory, but they weren't even made by Derailleurs staff. These were made by Benotto staff embedded within the Derailleurs factory, and they were supervised by Derailleurs staff. Ugo de Rosa never put a torch near one of these. It is certainly true, Ugo de Rosa made the special team bikes, the likes that were used by Francesco Moser. But this, I'm afraid, despite the fact this is a team bike, is still just a regular Benotto 3000 made at the Derailleurs factory by Benotto staff. I wish I could say it was super special. It's a very cool bike. It's a very neat bike, but it is what it is. It's a genuine, straightforward Benotto 3000. Obviously, in line with this channel, it is too small for me because that's how it goes. I seem to be a sucker for buying bikes that are too small. One of the reasons when we get building this up, we have a whole bench full behind me here of very, very nice Super Record Campagnolo parts, all period to go on here. But one thing I did have to change, I've gone for a regular Caloi 27.2 seat post because they made this one in 300mm. All the other Campagnolo ones on 200 or 220, I needed the 300 to get me the height. So they didn't make an extra long one in that size in that period. So that's one of the swap outs I've had to make. Now, when I got hold of this frame, it's from the early mid 80s and it was ridden by pro Italian Rosalino Manca, and you will not know that name. We'll come on to him in a moment. And it's a Fibok team bike. Now, it was originally white and blue when I got hold of this. It was the intention to keep it white and blue and do a sympathetic restoration on it. However, there were quite a lot of little dinks in the paint. And I don't know whether you've seen it. If you ever see a Benotto, either in the white and red or white and blue, the paint is a remarkably thick paint, and it's kind of like textured. Around this area here on the fade. It's quite bizarre. But that paint is very thick, and where the little chips were, moisture over time had got in. A little bit like when it gets under powder coating. It was kind of like that. And, you know, as I was chasing out and rubbing back the little chips, then you got the little spiders of discoloration and rust working their way out. So I was chasing them around all over, getting to the end. And in the end, I'd kind of taken away most of the paint, chasing out the spiders to get my way through. And at that point, it was just like, no, this has all got to come off. Treat the bare frame with some oxalic and then repaint. And of course, when faced with a repaint, I kind of wanted to keep it white and blue, but there was no way I could recreate that kind of thickness of paint and the quite interesting effect on the fade because of the way that it's kind of textured. So if it's a Benotto, you want it to be that kind of light gold of the Sanson era, the Moser era. Now, that's what I've gone for. If you are trying to recreate this, and this is Toyota Champagne Silver, is the most accurate reproduction of a modern paint of that colour. And yeah, it looks really cool. I really, really like it. I'm looking forward to building this up. So let's just get straight in there, start building. We're going to get that Campagnolo bottom bracket on there. I did get this, oddly enough, as a complete bike. So most of the parts going back on here are the parts that came off of it in the first place, which is always nice when dealing with a bike like this. So first up, bottom bracket and bearings, and let's get this assembled. So just getting ready now to pop the bottom bracket in there with fresh grease and all cleaned up. Interesting to note on the bearing cups on the Campagnolo there, you might just be able to see there's some quite deep threading kind of in there. That's not threading as such, it works in opposite direction to the pedal stroke to try and keep the debris out without having to put a rubber on there. Quite fascinating. Not a detail you see on a lot of bottom brackets, to be honest. Just another bit of Campagnolo magic that probably doesn't do anything. Now, as ever, when you're using a separate spindle bottom bracket like this, your adjustable cup is the one that goes in second. Tighten it up nice and tight until you can just feel the spindle binding ever so slightly on the bearings, and back them off then just a little bit, and then nip up the adjuster so it's nice and tight, and then make sure it's a nice smooth rotation of the spindle, and you're there. Now we're going to go on to forks, and yeah, eagle-eyed amongst you will notice I have two sets of forks for the Benotto. The reason being, these are the originals that came with the bike, and bizarrely, if we look here, I think you'll be able to see this in the light, there is a kind of indentation dent here and corresponding here on the other side, and they've been flattened on the inside. And I'm not entirely certain what would cause that. Obviously, you know, if you're trying to do a bad job of disassembly, you might clamp there, although it makes no sense that you would clamp there, but which you wouldn't do anyway. But they've been clamped on the inside as well. I don't really know what's happened here. And like most of us, I'm a bit paranoid when it comes to old forks. And when I see kind of deep dents like that, I just get a bit worried. So I happen to have, which was kind of handy, a spare set of exactly the same identical Benotto forks from exactly the same era. So these are in much better condition. There are no dinks or dents or problems, so I'm going to use these. These will stay with the bike because obviously you always want to keep your originals. But for me, safety wins out. I'm going to go with the other Benotto fork and just keep those. So that means first thing I've got to do is press in our headset cups, and as ever, use a headset press. They're dirt cheap. Do not wallop it with a hammer. Okay. So the steer assembly is going together nicely. We've got fresh grease, fresh bearings on here as well. But as it all came off this bike, it's going back on pretty neatly. Now, some of you may be wondering why I have Rosalino Manca's ex-team bike in the collection. It's fair to say he's not a known pro. The name does not roll off the tongue, and I've had this bike for many years, just never got round to building it up. Now the reason why I got it, Rosalino Manca himself was a Continental Pro for a few years, Italian, and he rode with the Fibok team for a couple of seasons, and then in so that was in 1984, 1985, but in 1987 he rode with 711, and interestingly enough, although this was his Fibok team bike, obviously when he finished riding for Fibok, he kept hold of this because there are period photographs of Manca riding for 711 in full 711 kit in the peloton on this bike. Now, that sounds strange because obviously we would assume at that point it'd be a red and white Huffy or perhaps the blue and green Mercs with 711, but 711 did some interesting contractual things. They had a lot of riders for hire. So although you sometimes got a full year's contract, a lot of the time you only got 3 months or 6 month contract to ride on the continent, things like that. And I'm pretty sure that's what Rosalino Manca had. And it's not that strange. Back in the day, a lot of this was going on. Andy Hampston, interestingly enough, his first year with 711 was also on a short-term race-only contract. So I think that is why you often see photographs in period of various racers with 711 using bikes that are clearly not team issue 711 bikes. But I think it's a push to suggest that this is in any way, shape or form a 711 team bike, because it's not. It's a Fibok team bike and that was ridden with 711 at certain races. I think that's about the closest I can get. I did have the very cool Rosalino Manca sticker recreated on here because it is super cool and neat. I'll bring you in close there, photograph of the original sticker as it was on there. But, you know, these things happen in history. And obviously, at the time when I bought this, I never thought I would get the opportunity to get hold of Sean Yates's genuine 711 team bike from a couple of years later, and that is something else to ride. It's one of my favourite bikes. So I guess because I had the Yates bike, this one just kind of went on the back burner for many years. It's fair to say I had time for the paint to harden. That's one way of looking at it. But let's just carry on with this front end assembly. Get that steerer lock nut on, and then we can go from there. Now with those forks assembled on there, let's get straight on with the crankset. Obviously, it is the Campagnolo Super Record, and we've got a fairly nice 52-42 on here. As you would expect, to be fair, it could have been a 53, so 52 is welcome. Pretty straightforward assembly. We've all done these before. But before you tighten these up, always check your clearance. Again, nothing worse than getting the bottom bracket spindle in the wrong way round and then driving the inner chainring straight into your fresh paint. You've all done it once, I'm sure. I have, and tend not to do it twice. that's exactly what we like to see at this point in a build. I'm going to move on to the brakes now. We have here the original Campagnolo Super Record brakes. Got lucky on these. I found a set of new old stock Campagnolo brake pads on there as well to finish it off, which should do a fine job of stopping us when we get this out there on the road. Also of note, if you have the recessed Allen bolt style fixings, these came in late 1979, early 1980. This being like a 1984 bike, we have Allen bolts, but that's one way of kind of figuring out what year your bike is, certainly around this point where there's a lot of little changes going on. The calipers are now on there, which means it's time for bars so I can carry on running brake lines. And just check out these bars. These are the original Benotto bar tapes on here. Now, I think this is a first for me, at least. Being able to keep original bar tape, it just doesn't really happen. This Benotto stuff, though, is you know, the original shiny kind of stuff. It's waterproof, it's kind of plasticky, it's not very grippy. You definitely need good leather gloves on here, but it is super cool, original to the bike. And you know, to be fair, I wouldn't have recreated this. It's not necessarily a look I'd have gone for, but on here, on this, oh, spot on. Brakes are now on. It's the next day because I had to get involved in something else, so we can carry on getting this together. We are going to crack on derailleurs and chain and wheels. Derailleurs are obviously the really cool and neat Super Record. Quite a few changes between these and the previous records. Obviously, notably, the black parts. That's how you can tell them really easily. But yeah, they are really nice. I've always got on with these great in the past, so we'll go ahead and just get these on. Yeah, not sure why, but the thread on the frame just furred up a little bit, and I felt resistance when I was going to put this on, so I stopped. Fortunately, I've got the correct M10x1 taper here, so you know, these are quite cheap, easy to get hold of, quite handy just to grab. You know, that's not something that often happens, but rather than force it, you can just run the thread through again, just clean it out. Done that, should go on fine now. Loads better. With those derailleurs fitted, I'm going to go ahead and pop on the wheels. Rather beautiful Campagnolo Record hubs with some really nice Maverick rims on there. I think we've got some Veloflex Criterion rubber and a very useful 12 to 26 Saxmy hub on here. I think it's a 6-speed. You can put 6 or 7s on these. Both work absolutely fine. But we'll get that on there, and then we'll think about the chain. Going to be using the slightly later Campagnolo C Record pedals on this. Same with the changes as well, because they came with that, so they're going to go back on with that. And then chain's going to go on. I've already set the derailleurs up. Well worth. Check your derailleur extensions, your backstops front and back before you put your chain on. It's nice and easy that way. It's under no tension, and you can check you're not going to take out your lovely wheel as soon as you put it on there. So we're going to go ahead and get both of those on there now. Yep, that's nice. So there we have it. The Benotto 3000 is a bit of a stunner. I love the rear chrome triangle coupled with the front chrome forks and that champagne silver paint job. Utterly perfect for this bike. Obviously, I really dig the original bar tape and the original parts back on it. To be fair, bit of a joy to build back up this one because everything came off of here and it all went back on really pretty darn well. Now, some of you may be wondering why I have not festooned this with a little blue detailing, which you often see on Benottos. I'm going to be honest, if you look at period pics of the, especially the team race bikes back in the day, there's very little of that blue detail pick out that we do see a lot of, especially on restorations. I find that a little bit picky. Also, if you watch the epically brilliant A Sunday in Hell, it was Jürgen Leth's 1977 epic on Paris-Roubaix that year. You will see at the opening credits, you've got a Sanson mechanic building up a Benotto 3000 for the Sanson team with Moser that year. And if you look carefully, there's no like little blue detailing and all the rest of it going on. It is just like this. I didn't want to get too fussy with it. This is how I wanted it. Of course, this probably will get passed on down the line, go on eBay before too long, mostly because it is definitely too small for a fella like me. But whoever gets it, if they want to add the blue detailing, that is really easy to do. Also, I had a little idea. Given, especially eBay sellers, as discussed, how they like to consider these built by the fair hands of the master craftsman Ugo de Rosa, and clearly they are not. We do have the original real deal Moser Sanson team bike ridden by Leonardo Mazzantini, which we did a video on a couple of years ago, and that is the real thing built by the man himself. So I think what we should do is, they're both period almost identical to each other. I think we should do the Moser de Rosa head on with the Benotto 3000 and see how they ride in comparison with each other. We're going to do that a little later. I want this to warm up. This is still a very cold start to the year at the moment. So we will come back to this and see how it rides. Anyway, in the meantime, do like and subscribe for anything that's cool to do with vintage bikes. Thanks a lot.